Early autumn. I was 42 and working contract to contract as a municipal network security auditor. Unromantic work that mostly involved aging routers, stale passwords, and rooms that smelled like dust and warm plastic. The assignment was in a rural town of about 3,000, the kind of place you pass on a highway without meaning to. I rented a small second-floor apartment above Halpern's Hardware at the corner of Main and Alder. The days were ordinary: courthouse paperwork, key cards that barely worked, coffee that tasted like the pot. What stood out was the night routine. Even after midnight, most houses stayed lit, steady and domestic, like people were simply up late doing normal things. If you prefer realistic horror accounts told plainly, you can subscribe for more like this one. At first, the town's wakefulness didn't feel ominous, just persistent. A low hum of traffic never quite tapered off. My task was straightforward: assess the server rooms in town hall, the library, and the police substation, then recommend upgrades and basic policy fixes. The work was easiest late, when systems were least used, so I scheduled diagnostics for 12:15 a.m. each night and kept my notes tight and boring: latency, access logs, patch levels. People in the offices described the town as quiet but industrious, and mentioned a few small factories that operated overnight. That explanation fit the soundscape: engines in the distance, an occasional heavy truck, a constant flattened movement. On my first evening, I noticed pedestrians at 11:30 p.m. They weren't out laughing or lingering. They moved steadily along the sidewalks, evenly spaced, under fluorescent streetlights that erased shadows instead of casting them. Coming back from town hall near midnight, I realized none of the storefront lights were off. Even places that were clearly closed, barber shop, florist, a little insurance office, had interior lights on like someone had just stepped away. Cars passed regularly, but none pulled into spots, and I didn't see any doors open, any greetings, any small signals of arrival. It was all transit. 3 people walked down Alder Street exactly half a block apart. Not a group. Not strangers drifting. A measured spacing that stayed intact as they moved. They didn't look at me, but not in a hostile way, more like they'd trained themselves not to register anything outside the lane they were in. I told myself it was shift changes, insomnia, late-night habits I didn't share. The rhythm of synchronized footsteps was easy to dismiss as coincidence. Over several nights, the pattern held. Movement never stopped, but nothing appeared to conclude. At 2 a.m., the diner was lit like it expected customers, chrome gleaming, coffee machines visible through the glass, yet no one sat inside. Instead, silhouettes kept sliding past the windows in the same direction, same pace, like the sidewalk was carrying them along. From apartment 2B, I watched the same blue 2008 sedan with a cracked left tail light circle, Main Street, every 20 minutes. It never parked, never turned into a driveway, never paused at the diner. By day, the town looked maintained but oddly quiet. Factory smokestacks emitted vapor continuously at night, but I didn't see delivery trucks arrive in daylight or workers leaving at dawn. I began timing foot traffic from my window because I couldn't stop myself. Spacing and pacing stayed unusually consistent. Too consistent for comfort, not dramatic, just exact. If you enjoy slow burn, realistic horror, a like helps me know to keep telling them this way. At night, the faint vibration of engines idling somewhere beyond sight felt less like industry and more like a system staying online. One night, reviewing network logs around 3:40 a.m., I noticed usage spikes that didn't match any scheduled job. The spikes aligned with what I could see through my window. Pedestrian density increasing, then thinning in predictable waves. It wasn't proof of anything, correlation is cheap, but it made my attention sharpen in a way I didn't like. The security cameras at Town Hall showed motion on sidewalks, clean little rectangles of movement, but no one entering buildings. Doors stayed shut, lobbies stayed empty. The town generated activity without any trace of people arriving somewhere. It occurred to me, quietly and without drama, that the town wasn't active. It was circulating. Server fans in the substation had a steady, breath-like rhythm, and I kept hearing it even when I was back in my apartment, as if the night had its own machinery. The bandwidth surge at 3:42 had been recorded 5 consecutive nights. The night it shifted, I was returning from the police substation at 1:10 a.m. I was halfway down Main Street when everything briefly emptied. Not slowed, emptied. The low hum cut out so cleanly it felt like pressure leaving a room. Engine noise ceased. Even the pale vapor above the factory stacks thinned, as if someone had turned a valve. My phone, mid-call to my voicemail just to timestamp a note, lost signal despite full coverage earlier. The screen showed an unanswered outgoing call at 1:10 a.m., then nothing. The streetlights held, but the light felt wrong without motion under it, flat and exposed. Then, from both ends of Main Street, pedestrians reappeared at the same time. Not drifting in from alleys or doors. Simply present, walking toward the intersection with a unified pace. The spacing that had always held half-block gaps collapsed. They moved closer, compressing like a line tightening. The blue sedan stopped directly beneath my apartment window, engine running. It idled there, perfectly centered, as if it had been placed. No one looked up. No one looked at me. But I had the clear, physical sense that if I went up my stairs and turned the key, I would be doing it in front of an audience that had just decided to pay attention. So I didn't. I kept walking past my building without changing my speed, turned into a side alley as if it was part of my route, and waited behind a dumpster that smelled like old cardboard and damp leaves. My hands stayed steady. My breathing stayed controlled. I listened. After a minute, maybe two, the hum returned. Footsteps resumed their prior spacing. The sedan pulled off and resumed its loop. My phone signal came back like a light switching on. I walked upstairs afterward quietly and did not turn on any lights. The next day, I filed a report to my firm that mentioned only infrastructure irregularities, gaps in camera retention, odd log synchronizations, minor inconsistencies that could be blamed on aging equipment. I did not describe the street. Writing it down felt like giving it a foothold. That night, I kept every light off in apartment 2B and worked by the dim glow of my laptop, watching Main Street through the blinds without being visible. The town continued its circulation as before, uninterrupted, as if the brief stillness had been a reset that corrected for my attention. I began shutting my laptop down earlier each evening, not because I was afraid, but because I was trying to reduce the number of moments I was awake and visible at the same time the town was doing whatever it did. I cut my contract short under the pretext of scheduling conflicts. My revised departure date was October 18th, and I kept repeating it to myself like it was a safety measure. Weeks later, back home, I reviewed the footage I'd saved out of habit. During the 1:10 a.m. stillness, the timestamp skipped precisely 1 minute, 1:09 to 1:11, without any corruption artifacts that usually accompany dropped frames. It was clean, as if the missing minute had been removed rather than lost. In every clip where the blue sedan appeared, its license plate was blurred, though other plates in the same frame were sharp enough to read. The blur was consistent across cameras and angles, too consistent to be a lens issue. I pulled factory output reports from public records, more to settle my mind than to prove anything. They showed normal productivity, yet there were no logged overnight staff entries in any of the municipal access systems I'd audited. No badge scans, no door events. I still can't identify a single frame that shows someone entering or exiting a building. Only movement past windows, only circulation. Paused video produces a faint digital static, and I found myself listening to it like it might explain what the images refused to show. I tell myself small towns maintain rhythms outsiders misinterpret. Some places are simply nocturnal. Some people live with routines that don't need witnesses. But I've never seen a place so consistently awake without purpose, awake without the small mess of human arrival. What unsettles me isn't activity. It's the absence of conclusion. Nothing ever seems to get where it's going. The last image I kept is simple. Main Street at 2 a.m., every light on, every window lit, and no one inside. Just the steady glow as if the town was keeping itself visible for something that might pass through. If you know someone who appreciates grounded horror told without theatrics, share this with them and subscribe for the next account. Late spring, I was 45 and working contract assignments as a structural insurance assessor, the kind of work that takes you into barns with warped beams and kitchens with hairline cracks no one else notices. The job placed me in a small agricultural town evaluating minor storm damage. Roof panels lifted, outbuildings shifted on shallow foundations. I rented a furnished cottage at the edge of town near a grid of irrigation fields. It was labeled Cottage Number 7 on Millstone Road, modest but clean, with thin curtains and a view of low, flat farmland. If you prefer realistic horror accounts told plainly, you can subscribe for more. At night, the town seemed active but calm. Porch lights glowed steadily. Somewhere beyond the tree line, low diesel engines hummed without urgency, like work continuing at a reasonable pace. My inspections required photographing barns and detached structures before dawn. Early light is neutral and consistent, and insurers prefer consistency. Residents told me mornings were best before the heat, which I accepted without much thought. I began driving out at 4:30 a.m., logging my inspection route daily at 4:32. Cold air at that hour carried a metallic scent from the irrigation water, as if the soil itself had been rinsed overnight. I noticed farm equipment already moving along distant roads, headlights low, engines steady, yet by midday the surrounding fields appeared untouched. No fresh tire cuts in soil, no churned earth, no sign of active planting or harvest. At first, I assumed I was simply missing the main operations. Each morning, the same red case IH combined harvester moved along the highway bordering town. It had one missing rear reflector, which made it easy to identify. It never seemed to enter a field. It passed through town limits at a measured pace and continued toward the next stretch of open road. The driver's silhouette remained upright and fixed behind the glass cab. No shift in posture, no visible adjustment of controls. The tires hummed steadily against empty asphalt. I told myself it was being transported between properties overnight. That explanation fit well enough to keep me from looking too closely. After several days, I began noticing the combine passed at precisely the same minute, 4:32 a.m., the exact time my route log began each day. It wasn't approximate. It was exact. At 5:12 a.m., porch lights across town shut off simultaneously. Not in clusters. All at once. The first time it happened, I assumed a timer system. The sixth morning, when 5:12 appeared again in my photo metadata, I stopped assuming. During daylight, I saw almost no one outdoors. Blinds remained partially drawn. The local cafe was open all night, lights bright and clean, but closed from 6 a.m. until noon. In my inspection photos, I began noticing interior lights glowing in homes that appeared otherwise unoccupied. No vehicles in driveways, no open doors, no movement in yards. If you appreciate slow burn, realistic horror, a like lets me know to continue in this direction. Just before 5:12, there was always a faint, uniform clicking sound, as if dozens of switches were being flipped in unison. One morning, I parked my truck near the highway shoulder to photograph a grain silo. My dash clock read 4:31 a.m. The red combine approached on schedule, engine steady. As it passed, it slowed. Not abruptly, just enough to register intention. The cab pivoted slightly toward my parked truck, though I couldn't see a face inside, only a dark outline behind glass reflecting the dawn. The engine idle dropped to a lower, almost watchful vibration. In that moment, I understood something simple. I was not part of the routine. The pattern operated cleanly until observed. My presence had introduced friction. When the combine resumed speed, it did so smoothly, as if nothing had occurred. 2 mornings later, I decided to confirm what I thought I was seeing. I parked near the highway at 4:20 a.m., earlier than usual. The town felt darker. Porch lights remained on longer than they had in previous days, their glow stretching toward the road. 4:32 passed. No combine. At 4:34, headlights appeared from both directions of the highway simultaneously. 2 red combines, identical, same missing rear reflector, same proportions, approached at equal speed. They did not drift toward fields. They did not slow for the town. As they neared my parked truck, I realized their paths were narrowing in parallel lines that would intersect precisely where I was positioned. Neither machine swerved. Neither changed speed. Twin diesel engines merged into one continuous roar that filled the air, steady and mechanical, without aggression. I started my engine, waited half a second to be certain, then pulled onto a dirt access road marked County Route 14, just before they reached me. The turn was tight, gravel snapped under my tires. Both combines passed the point where I had been parked, perfectly aligned with each other, then continued forward beyond town limits without turning. They did not acknowledge my movement. They did not adjust. At 5:12 a.m., as if on cue, porch lights across town shut off in unison. I rescheduled my inspections for midday only. I cited lighting inconsistencies in my report, which was technically true. Residents I encountered during brief afternoon visits politely discouraged early returns without providing reasons. They remained courteous but firm. I cut the contract short, citing equipment issues and delayed deliverables. My checkout receipt from cottage number 7 is dated May 26th. At night, even after I'd decided to leave, the red combine continued passing along Millstone Road at 4:32 a.m. I closed the curtains and lay awake listening to the distant mechanical rhythm continuing beyond the fields, steady and unchanged. It felt less like agriculture and more like maintenance. Back home, I reviewed highway traffic data for that county. No farm equipment was logged overnight during my stay. My GPS records showed 2 overlapping vehicle paths at 4:34 a.m. on the day of the incident, perfectly parallel lines occupying the same stretch of highway. The file is labeled Millstone_0426. Insurance claim records listed no active large-scale farming operations within town limits. Most properties I assessed were marked occupied, though I had seen few residents in daylight. Sitting at my desk, listening to the quiet ticking of my office clock, I traced those GPS lines repeatedly. They never diverged. Some towns work nights. I understand that. Machinery moves. Lights stay on. But work leaves marks, soil disturbed, doors opened, lights eventually turned off by someone. This town only moved. What unsettles me isn't machinery operating in darkness. It's that nothing was ever being harvested. The last clear memory I have is Millstone Road at 4:32 a.m., empty fields on both sides, diesel hum fading into open highway, and not a single acre in use. If you know someone who appreciates grounded, restrained horror, share this with them, and subscribe for the next account. Midwinter, I was 41 and working a temporary contract to catalog municipal property records in a town that sat between 2 highways, yet felt strangely bypassed by both. On a map, it looked accessible. In person, it felt insulated. I stayed in room 12 at the Pine Crest Motel, a narrow building facing the courthouse square. From my window, I could see the courthouse steps and the second-floor offices. At night, the square seemed lively in a restrained way, windows lit, faint silhouettes shifting behind curtains, slow-moving cars tracing the perimeter. If you prefer realistic horror accounts told plainly, you can subscribe for more. Inside my room, radiator pipes knocked softly at uneven intervals, as if adjusting to a temperature that never quite settled. My assignment was simple: digitize handwritten deed transfers, many of them decades old, and reconcile them with current filings. The volume of paperwork required me to stay into the evening. By 6 p.m., courthouse staff would leave, locking interior offices, yet the building lights remained on. I assumed janitorial or clerical staff worked late shifts out of view. The archive cabinet labeled Deeds 1974 to 1989 became my routine starting point each night. Fluorescent lights hummed above empty desks while I scanned brittle pages and logged names into a database. Through the courthouse windows, I occasionally saw cars circling the square, unhurried and steady. It felt like a town maintaining itself after hours, nothing more. Within 2 weeks, I realized the courthouse lights never switched off. Not once. Even during heavy wind or snow advisories, the interior glow remained constant. Each morning, the security alarm panel near the entrance read, "Armed 1802, as though it had been set precisely at closing and never disengaged. At 3 a.m., from my motel window, I heard muted engine sounds circling the square, slow loops, never abrupt. During daylight hours, however, businesses remained closed longer than expected, and sidewalks stayed mostly empty. The continuity didn't feel dramatic. It felt administrative. As I entered more records into the system, a pattern emerged. Every address in town changed ownership monthly, not through foreclosure or inheritance, just transfers. The same surnames rotated across dozens of properties in a steady cycle. Parcel number 1187 alone had transferred 9 times in 1 year. I searched for legal explanations, estate settlements, tax disputes, redevelopment. There were none. Census data showed the population unchanged for 15 years. No influx, no departure. At night, snow fell silently under the unwavering courthouse lights. I watched from room 12 as flakes accumulated on parked cars while the building's windows remained bright and sterile. The sense wasn't of growth or decay. It was of continuous processing. If you appreciate slow burn, realistic horror, a like lets me know to continue telling them this way. The town appeared to be updating itself, line by line. Out of habit, I cross-referenced utility bills with property transfers. Electric consumption across homes was nearly identical each night, peaking between 1 o'clock and 4 a.m. The usage curves matched with unnatural precision. At 2:47 a.m., the glow of my laptop screen reflected in the motel window, overlaying the lit courthouse beyond. I felt a quiet shift in my thinking. The pattern wasn't expansion or decline. It was maintenance. The town's activity didn't create change, it sustained equilibrium. Utility log timestamps, 2:13 a.m., again and again, suggested something running in cycles, independent of individual lives. I understood then that the movement outside wasn't random traffic. It was circulation. One evening, heavy snowfall began unexpectedly. By 11 p.m., the roads were blanketed in white. No plows had been scheduled according to the town's public works calendar. From my window, I expected the square to empty. It didn't. Cars continued circling the courthouse at the same measured speed. Snow absorbed sound until engines seemed distant and hollow. Tire tracks formed loops in the fresh powder, perfectly curved, overlapping but never deviating. At 1:30 a.m., the snowfall stopped abruptly. My phone issued a weather alert at 1:32 a.m., confirming the system had moved east. I stepped outside the motel briefly, boots pressing into untouched snow along the sidewalk. The air felt thick and still. Fresh snow covered the pavement beyond the loops I'd seen earlier. The sidewalks were smooth, uninterrupted. No footprints, no door impressions. Yet vehicles continued moving around the square. Their headlights cut across the courthouse facade. I watched closely. No new tire tracks appeared behind them. The snow remained unbroken. The courthouse lights flickered once, briefly dimming, then stabilizing. I stayed where I was long enough to confirm what I was seeing. Then I returned to room 12 and locked the door without approaching the square any further. Morning revealed streets partially cleared, though I found no record of plow deployment. The loops I had seen were gone. Sidewalks appeared salted and manageable, but no one mentioned the storm in conversation. Inside the courthouse, everything looked undisturbed. Desks aligned, papers stacked, the archive cabinet closed. The alarm panel still displayed armed 1802. I completed my digital scans ahead of schedule and requested reassignment without offering details. The motel clerk processed my checkout on January 14th without comment, sliding the receipt across the counter as though departures were routine. Wet slush melted under a pale winter sun, and by afternoon the square looked ordinary again. Back home, reviewing my photographs, I noticed something unsettling. In frames taken overnight from my motel window, no vehicles appeared. The square was empty in every image, though I distinctly remembered watching cars circle. Deed rotations continued in the public database even after my departure. Parcel number 1187 transferred again on February 3rd. Same surnames, same sequence. Utility usage data remained unchanged month to month. On quiet afternoons in my office, I scroll through those records. The soft movement of the cursor across the screen feels louder than it should. The town persists in clean lines of data, never deviating. I've worked in towns that decline and towns that grow. This one simply persists. Lights on, roads circling, names rotating, nothing ever arriving, nothing ever leaving. Sometimes I check the courthouse webcam online. The camera angle hasn't changed. The square looks calm. The windows are lit. In the dark of my office, the digital live stream flickers softly on the screen. The lights are still on. If you know someone who appreciates grounded, restrained horror, share this account with them and subscribe for the next one.